Islam in South Asia, by which we mean India and the lands that make up that subcontinent. Political history. Invasion of Sindh, which is in India, today Pakistan, took place first in the year 711, and Muslim troops were sent in that year. The immediate cause of that attack is said to be a Hindu prince's interference with the Arab shipping trade. Arab shipping in the Indian Ocean is attested at that time. It had been going on for some time. And of course, these were Muslims. And the Hindu prince interfered with that ship, captured the ship, and imprisoned the people on the ship. And an appeal was made by Muslims on that ship to the governor of Basra. His name is Hajjaj, a very intriguing figure in Islamic history. And he sent Muhammad bin Qasim, who was his nephew, as to heading an army of a few thousand. And Muhammad bin Qasim was only 17 years old, one of the youngest generals to command an army and go all the way to Sindh and attack that. Further attacks took place by Mahmud Ghaznavi. I'm sorry, there's an N missing after the Z, Ghaznavi. These are the years of his rule. From the northwestern part of India, he entered India on a number of occasions and conquered large areas. Tamerlane also. The word lane actually is a Persian word. It's lang, which means lame. Timur lang, Timur who was lame. So it became part of his name. He entered India, worked havoc, 1398. But there were many small states in India, Muslim states, but systematic conquest and retention and control of India took place in the 16th century, beginning in that century, that is, and Babur, again from the northwest of India, entered India in 1526, overthrew the existing Muslim ruler, and then established what's known as the Mughul dynasty, which lasted until 1857. A number of rulers are very, very famous in that dynasty. Then starts British rule. The British had already made their presence felt in India. They came as traders initially, and gradually they took advantage of the internecine fighting of India, and they very often played one group against another, Muslims against Hindus, this Muslim prince against that Muslim prince, and so on. And finally they were able to establish their formal control of India in the year 1857. And this rule lasted until 1947, when the British had to leave, perhaps under some pressures. The Second World War put too many pressures on the British people or British Crown, and India was partitioned in that year, 47, and we have India and Pakistan coming into existence in the month of August of that year. Pakistan was partitioned in the year 1971, and two countries, Pakistan and Bangladesh, came into existence. Pakistan was there, Bangladesh, the new country. There's a book that I would recommend that you read. It's written by Sir Thomas Arnold. Sir Thomas Arnold, a famous British Orientalist, who was a professor at the University of London, but he taught at University of Aligarh in northern India for some time, and then he came to Lahore and taught at one what's called government college, a historic institution, exists to this day, and that is where Iqbal studied. And Iqbal was a student of Thomas Arnold. And it was at Thomas Arnold's urging that Iqbal went to Europe for study. So there's a story about that, thereby hangs a tale. Thomas Arnold wrote a number of books, very well researched. There's a book, Painting in Islam, if you're interested. It has lots of pictures and a history of painting in Islam. But the book I'm referring to right now is called The Preaching of Islam. And in this book, second edition I think came out in 1932, if I'm not mistaken. In that book, Arnold reviews the spread and growth of Islam in the world, and he takes it region by region. And the main point he makes is that Islam was spread not by the sword, but by peaceful means, and that the most effective agents of the spread of Islam were Sufis. So he gives lots of historical detail to substantiate his thesis. So that's an important book in this respect. So, role of Sufis in spreading Islam. There are several reform movements and reformists who became known throughout the Muslim world during the reign of Akbar, and Akbar was a Mughul ruler. Babur, his son Humayun, Humayun's son Akbar, and these are his years, died 1605. Akbar, and it's funny how Hindu and Muslim communities view the same history very, very differently. Akbar tried to unify India, and he invented a new religion. He tried to combine elements from Hinduism, from Buddhism, and from Islam, and he called that Dīn-i Ilāhī, which is divine religion or God's religion. This was a syncretist religion, of course. It was not Hinduism, it was not Islam, it was not Buddhism. It was elements taken from all these religions and a new concoction, divine religion. And he tried to enforce it, and he was quite oppressive about it too. Anyone, especially Muslims, who did not accept the divine religion was oppressed and punished by Akbar. And there was then a reaction against Ahmad Sirhindi, and he worked on the courtiers of Akbar, on the bigwigs, those people who had influence at the court of Akbar. And when Akbar was succeeded by his son Jahangir, the divine religion came to an end because of Ahmad Sirhindi's influence. Initially, of course, Jahangir also followed that religion, and Jahangir had a door made, and people used to enter into that door. So when Ahmad Sirhindi, and it was not very high, and so you had to bow necessarily if you wanted to come into the king's presence. And Ahmad Sirhindi, who was an avowed opponent of this divine religion, when he was invited to the court, he did not bow. He put in his legs first like this and then came in. And finally, his influence brought this divine religion to an end, and so Islam in its orthodox form, let's say, made this reassertion. One great scholar, Shah Waliullah, probably the first great scholar of modern Islam, not only in India, but in all of Islam, can be said to be this man, Shah Waliullah, 1702-1763. And he was worried about Muslim disunity, and he worked toward Muslim religious unity. And he also invited rulers from Afghanistan to counter the influence of certain Hindu rulers. Ahmad Shah Abdali was the ruler he invited, and he came and fought against the Hindus to counterbalance the rise of Hindu militant forces. Practically all schools of law, all schools of religious thought in Islam in India today try to trace their religious and spiritual lineage back to Shah Waliullah. His father was a great scholar, and Shah Waliullah became a teacher at that school at a very, very young age. And he had 4 sons who were equally great scholars. So Shah Waliullah's school of thought became extremely influential. And all the movements in India later were somehow connected with Shah Waliullah. Iqbal is again a seminal figure, and I could talk for the last half hour on Iqbal. I'll resist the temptation to do so. Talked enough about him. But he's one modern thinker that you cannot omit. His religious thought, his political thought is a must if you want to understand modern Islam. In fact, one of the greatest scholars, best-known scholars in modern times was Fazlur Rahman, professor at the University of Chicago, and he has written that Iqbal's book, Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam, written in English by him, and I think I mentioned it last time, published 1934 by Oxford, is the most important philosophical text in modern Islam, philosophical text. So he wrote serious prose, philosophical, legal, political issues on the one hand. On the other hand, he composed brilliant and beautiful poetry in both Arabic and, Persian and Urdu, which has been rendered into many, many languages, many European languages, Western languages, and many Islamic languages. There are Iqbal experts in Europe. There are Czechs, there are French, there are German, there are American experts, people who have gotten their PhDs doing work on Iqbal studies. Some time ago, a woman from France called me. She's a Pakistani doing her PhD on Iqbal at the University of Paris. And she wanted some advice on Iqbal. She's from Pakistan. She's a lecturer over there, but she's there doing her PhD on Iqbal. And there are other cases also. So Iqbal is an extremely important seminal figure. And his influence, actually the Iranians acknowledge his influence in the Iran Revolution 1979, and likewise some Central Asian states where Persian is spoken, he is read, and he is adored. Turks love him. And in Rumi's, where Rumi is buried in Konya, Iqbal regarded Rumi as his master. So right next to Rumi's tomb is a symbolic tomb of Iqbal. And it says there Iqbal's name. So Turks love him, Persians, Iranians love him, people in Central Asia, they love him. And his translations have been made into numerous languages, with commentaries and introductory books and critical books written in numerous languages also. One other figure, Maududi, 1903-1979. He's probably the most influential religious thinker of modern times. He's been given a bad reputation these days by the State Department and certain sections of the intelligentsia. They call him a fundamentalist and so on. He was a very good friend of the US during the communist invasion of Muslim lands. His writings against communism actually stemmed the tide of communism in the Indian subcontinent. Very, very powerful critique of communism. At that time, he was a great friend of the West. But now, things have changed. He was a prodigy too, at a very young age, learned all the Islamic disciplines, Arabic, Persian, Urdu. He knew English also. And a very lucid writer. Translations exist, of his books exist in many languages, but unfortunately not very good translations. His main thesis is that today, large-scale, effective, lasting change in society cannot be brought about without using the apparatus of the state. So his message is both political and religious. And he tried to reform, not with much success, the political institutions of Muslims in India. 47, he came from India to Lahore, where he settled. And he has written practically on every single subject. He was influenced by Iqbal also. In fact, Iqbal invited him to come to Lahore because Iqbal wanted to use him to recodify Islamic law. But when Maududi arrived as a young man in Lahore, Iqbal had died a couple of days before that, and so the two could not meet. But Iqbal was very impressed with Maududi. He had read one or two books by him, and that's why he invited Maududi to come to him. So he's someone who needs to be considered. Many of the religious organizations that are found in the US, like ISNA, you might have heard of that, Islamic Society of North America, or ICNA, ICNA, Islamic Circle of North America, these were established by the followers of Maududi, or they had a significant hand in the establishment of these organizations. And his influence, he drafted the syllabus for Medina University in Saudi Arabia. He was invited specially by the king of Saudi Arabia to do that. So his influence is wide-ranging, and it continues to this day.